The air in the room is thick with the smell of wax and incense, the flickering candle flames casting eerie shadows on the walls. Nathaniel and Samuel stand face to face in the center of the dimly lit chamber, their expressions serious, almost hollow. The ancient symbols surrounding them seem to pulse with a life of their own, and an unsettling energy fills the space. Thunder crashes outside, and the storm rages louder, as though nature itself is warning them. With trembling hands, they place their palms together, sealing the pact that will bind them forever. "We share everything," Nathaniel declares, his voice low and intense. No matter the cost. The brothers' eyes lock, an unspoken understanding passing between them. The words they've just spoken are not just a promise, they are a curse. They've sworn an oath, one born of greed, desperation, and a twisted sense of loyalty. The pact is simple: share everything, including their lovers. But as they speak the words aloud, something shifts. The room feels colder, darker. A chill runs down their spines, and for a moment neither one can shake the feeling that they've just invited something ancient and malevolent into their lives. But it's too late to turn back now. As they finish the ritual, the candle flames flicker violently, as if reacting to their pledge. The walls groan under the weight of some unseen force, and an oppressive silence follows. For a moment, the brothers stand frozen, caught in the tension of the moment. Neither of them speaks, neither of them dares to. The storm outside intensifies, echoing their unspoken fears. Something is watching them, something they've just awakened with their words, but neither of them can bring themselves to acknowledge it. They are bound by the pact now, forever. A sudden gust of wind bursts through the room, extinguishing the candles in an instant. In the darkness they hear it, a low, almost inaudible whisper, like a voice carried on the wind. It's neither malevolent nor kind, but there is a coldness to it, a promise, a warning. Samuel shudders and looks over at Nathaniel, his eyes wide with unease. But Nathaniel merely nods, as if expecting this. They've made their choice, and now there is no escape from the path ahead. As they leave the room, the door creaks shut behind them, and the heavy weight of the pact hangs in the air like a dark cloud. Outside, the storm finally begins to subside, but the oppressive feeling lingers. The mansion, isolated and ancient, seems to hold its breath, as if waiting for something to happen. The brothers, now alone in their silence, make their way through the corridors. They speak little, each consumed by their own thoughts. What they don't know is that their pact has set something in motion, something they can't yet understand. The consequences of their vow will unfold in ways they can't predict, and soon strange things will begin to happen, things that will make them question their very soul. The shadows they've invited into their lives are already closing in, and their lives will never be the same. It begins with small things, almost imperceptible. A lover's glance that lingers too long, a whisper of a name in the darkness. At first, Nathaniel and Samuel believe it's nothing more than the result of their pact, a mere consequence of their twisted oath. But when they share their lovers for the first time, the mood shifts. What was once a passionate connection turns cold, distant. Their partners seem distracted, unsettled, and then, without warning, they vanish. One by one, each lover disappears without a trace, as if swallowed by the very shadows of the mansion. No messages, no clues, just an empty space where they once stood. Desperation creeps in as the brothers search frantically for their missing lovers. They scour the mansion, comb through every room, and question everyone they know, but there are no answers. It's as if their lovers never existed. They try to comfort each other, trying to rationalize the strange events, but the uncertainty gnaws at them. Something is wrong, something they can't understand. The eerie emptiness in the house grows, as if the walls themselves are conspiring against them. The brothers are trapped in a game they never agreed to play, a game where the stakes are more than they ever anticipated. The mansion, once a place of refuge, begins to feel more like a prison. As the days pass, Nathaniel and Samuel grow more paranoid, their minds fraying at the edges. They begin hearing strange noises in the halls, soft footsteps when no one is there, a faint whisper when no one is speaking. The shadows seem to stretch unnaturally, and the air grows thick with an oppressive sense of dread. It's as though the very fabric of their reality is shifting, warping around them. They find it harder and harder to tell what's real and what's a trick of their minds. The curse has begun to unravel them, and they don't know how much longer they can hold on. Each night, the brothers are haunted by dreams of their lost lovers. In these dreams, the lovers beg them for help, pleading for their release, their voices echoing in a distant, otherworldly plane. But every time Nathaniel and Samuel try to reach them, they are pulled away, helpless. The dreams become more vivid, more real, until the lines between dream and reality blur. The brothers wake in cold sweats, unsure of where they are or what's happening. Is it the curse, or is it their minds unraveling? The question gnaws at them, an unspoken fear that grows with each passing night. The atmosphere between Nathaniel and Samuel shifts as well. They begin to distance themselves from one another, the bond they once shared weakening under the pressure of the curse. Trust, which had been the foundation of their pact, starts to crumble. Both men are on edge, second-guessing every word, every action. Suspicion runs rampant. Could one of them be responsible for the disappearances? Or are they both simply pawns in a much larger, more sinister game? The once unbreakable bond between them now feels fragile, and they start to wonder if they will be the next victims of the curse they've unleashed. Tension reaches a boiling point when, one evening, Nathaniel stumbles upon a strange symbol carved into the floor of the mansion's cellar, a symbol he doesn't recognize but feels a deep sense of dread upon seeing. He shows it to Samuel, and for the first time since the pact was made, a sense of fear grips them both. The symbol is linked to the ancient curse, an omen of what is to come. The realization hits them hard. The force they've been toying with is far older, far more powerful than they ever imagined. The curse isn't just punishing them, it's using them as instruments in a far larger scheme. As they delve deeper into the mystery, the brothers uncover a hidden journal written in an ancient script, detailing the tragic fate of the last family to live in the mansion. The journal speaks of a pact made long ago, a promise of eternal loyalty that led to the destruction of everyone involved. The journal's final entry is chilling. The price for sharing is always higher than you think. The brothers now realize that they are not just dealing with a curse. They are in the midst of an ancient ritual, one that has claimed countless victims before them. Their lives, their very souls, are being toyed with, and they don't know how to break free. As they search for answers, the brothers can't shake the feeling that something is watching them. It's in the corners of their vision, a shadow that moves when they aren't looking, a presence they can't quite name but feel with every fiber of their being. The mansion feels alive with it, as if the walls themselves are aware of their every move. Every door creaks open on its own, and every shadow feels like it's hiding something. The curse, it seems, has a will of its own. And as the brothers uncover more, they realize the terrifying truth. They are not in control anymore. Something far more sinister is watching, waiting, and it's only a matter of time before it claims them as its next victims. The first whispers came on a moonless night, so faint at first that they could have been mistaken for the wind or the house settling. But as the hours stretched on, the sound grew clearer, more distinct. It wasn't the wind, it was something else. Soft, guttural voices echoing through the walls like whispers from another realm. Nathaniel and Samuel were both awake when they first heard it. At first they tried to brush it off, telling themselves it was just their nerves frayed by the recent events. But as the whispers continued night after night, it became impossible to deny that something was in the house with them. The brothers' unease began to turn into dread. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, as though the voices were calling to them from deep within the mansion's dark corners. No matter how hard they tried to locate the source, they never could. It was as though the sound was coming from within the very walls themselves, from the unseen spaces behind the plaster and brick. Every night, the whispers seemed to grow stronger, more menacing, until they could no longer sleep without hearing them, gnawing at the edges of their sanity. The house felt alive with them, watching, waiting. One evening, Samuel couldn't take it anymore. In a fit of desperation, he retreated to the mansion's dusty library, hoping the quiet of the room might offer him some solace. The walls were lined with ancient books, their spines cracked and faded with time. As he scanned the shelves, one book in particular caught his eye. It was old, bound in leather, and covered in strange symbols. Opening it, he discovered that it wasn't a mere book of rituals. It was a record of pacts, curses, and the dark history of the very house they were living in. The pages were yellowed with age, but the words were still legible. Samuel's heart pounded as he began to read, realizing with horror that the pact they had made was not merely a bond between brothers. It was part of a far older, darker curse. The more Samuel read, the more the weight of the truth began to sink in. The curse they had awakened was not just an act of personal damnation. It was a force older than humanity itself, passed down through generations, designed to punish those who dared to break the natural order. The whispers were not just voices. They were the echoes of those who had been consumed by the curse before them. The mansion, the pact. It was all part of a ritual that had begun long ago, and now Nathaniel and Samuel were the latest to be drawn into its web. A cold chill gripped Samuel's chest as he realized they weren't simply being haunted, they were being hunted. Samuel rushed to find Nathaniel, hoping to share the discovery, to warn him, but when he entered his brother's room, he found Nathaniel staring blankly at the wall, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and something darker, something that was creeping in, changing him. "I heard it too," Nathaniel whispered, his voice hollow. "I've been hearing it for days." Samuel felt a shiver crawl down his spine. Nathaniel wasn't just scared, he was consumed, his mind already slipping away. He was no longer the man he had known. The pact, the curse, it was working its way through him, infecting him, unraveling him from the inside out. Despite his desperation, Samuel could see that Nathaniel wasn't the same. His brother's eyes darted nervously around the room, his hands shaking. "We're not alone here," Nathaniel muttered. "They're watching us." His words were slurred, his voice rising with paranoia. Samuel realized that whatever was haunting them wasn't just in the walls, it was in Nathaniel's mind, twisting him into something unrecognizable. The brothers were no longer on the same side. Samuel's grip on reality began to slip as well, the whispers growing louder in his ears, drowning out his thoughts. But Samuel still had one clear goal in mind: to break the curse before it consumed them both. With a growing sense of urgency, Samuel returned to the library, searching for any clues that might offer a way out. The pages of the ancient book seemed to call to him, but the more he read, the more he realized that every attempt to undo the pact came with a price, one that neither he nor Nathaniel were willing to pay. The book spoke of sacrifices, of lives lost, of those who had tried and failed to escape the curse. The whispers had driven them to madness, and now they were closing in on Samuel and Nathaniel. The more he studied, the clearer it became. There was no escape from the curse. There was only survival, for a time. As Samuel dug deeper, the mansion itself seemed to respond. The whispers grew more insistent, the walls groaning with unseen pressure. The house seemed to be alive, its very foundations shifting as though it was trying to entrap them further. Despair began to settle in. It was too late to escape. The mansion was part of the curse, a prison that kept those trapped inside until their minds fractured completely. Samuel felt the weight of the curse pressing down on him, and with each passing day, the whispers grew louder, more inescapable. Nathaniel, already lost, was slipping further into madness. Samuel was running out of time. The curse had them both now, and there was no telling how much longer they could resist. Nathaniel's mind, once sharp and resolute, had begun to splinter. The whispers that tormented him grew louder, but now they carried a new message, one of suspicion. He looked at Samuel with growing doubt, wondering if his brother was truly on his side or hiding something from him. The isolation of the mansion, the cursed bond they had formed, and the dark secrets Samuel had uncovered in the book only deepened Nathaniel's paranoia. Samuel's cryptic words, his obsession with the ancient rituals. Nathaniel began to question everything. Was Samuel really trying to save them? Or had he become a part of the curse in a way Nathaniel couldn't comprehend? The tension between the brothers was palpable, every glance filled with suspicion, every word now coated with a hint of distrust. Nathaniel's thoughts became consumed with one idea. Samuel was not to be trusted. In the dead of night, when the house seemed to close in around him, Nathaniel made a fateful decision. He would no longer rely on his brother. He couldn't. Alone, he would find a way to break free of the curse that had haunted them both. But he didn't know where to turn, until the whispers led him to a forgotten chamber deep in the mansion, hidden from Samuel's eyes. There Nathaniel found an altar, ancient and untouched, with a dark, powerful symbol etched into the stone. Driven by desperation, Nathaniel knelt before the altar and, without fully understanding the consequences, whispered an incantation from the book. The air in the room grew thick, and the shadows seemed to stretch toward him, an unearthly presence emerging from the dark. The entity that answered his call was not like the one described in the book. It was more powerful, more malevolent than Nathaniel could have imagined. Its voice was like the scraping of nails on a chalkboard, cold and indifferent, offering him the freedom he so desperately sought. "What is your price?" it asked, its tone flat, as if it already knew the answer. In that moment, Nathaniel's fear was swallowed by his desire to break free. Without thinking, he offered what the entity demanded, a part of his soul, a piece of his very essence, to be claimed in exchange for the curse's release. It was a bargain Nathaniel believed he could afford. But the entity had other plans. The moment the pact was sealed, Nathaniel felt an overwhelming surge of power course through him, his mind growing sharper, more focused, but at a terrible cost. His body began to tremble as though something dark and ancient was taking root inside him. He had made a fatal mistake. The moment the pact was sealed, the house seemed to groan in protest. The air grew colder, and the shadows in the corners of the room stretched and twisted unnaturally. Nathaniel stood, his heart racing, but he felt no relief, only a deep, gnawing emptiness. The power the entity had promised was there, but so was something else, an overwhelming darkness that filled every corner of his being. He could feel the curse tightening its grip around him, but now it was not just his soul that was at stake. The entity had taken more than he had bargained for. It had claimed something far more precious, his humanity. The realization hit him too late. As the hours passed, Nathaniel's once clear mind began to fracture. The power within him swelled, but it was twisted, corrupting him from the inside out. His thoughts were no longer his own, consumed by the darkness he had invited in. He could hear the whispers more clearly now, voices that weren't just in the walls, but inside his mind. They told him things, terrible things, urging him to surrender completely to the entity, to embrace the power that was now his. But at the same time, they reminded him of what he had lost, the very core of his being. He had traded his soul for freedom. But at what cost? When Nathaniel finally returned to the room he shared with Samuel, his brother immediately noticed the change. Nathaniel's eyes were cold, distant, as if he was no longer truly present. Samuel's concern shifted to alarm when he saw the look in his brother's eyes. The same darkness that had plagued them both was now fully consuming Nathaniel. "What have you done?" Samuel demanded, his voice shaking. But Nathaniel didn't answer. His lips curled into a twisted smile as he looked at his brother, a smile that wasn't his own. The entity had taken full control. The house trembled as the entity's influence began to seep into every corner, every shadow. The brothers, once bound by their pact, now found themselves on opposing sides. Nathaniel had become the puppet of a force beyond comprehension, and Samuel, still struggling to hold on to his sanity, realized the full extent of what had happened. He was no longer just fighting a curse. He was fighting for his brother's soul. The mansion, once a place of refuge, now felt like a tomb, its walls closing in around them. The consequences of Nathaniel's decision were just beginning to unfold, and the violence of the curse would soon become undeniable. Samuel could feel the weight of the curse pressing down on him more each day. His once clear thoughts were now clouded by doubt and fear, the whispers growing louder, more insistent. He tried to fight it, to resist the pull of the darkness that had begun to overtake them both. But as the days passed, he could see the change in Nathaniel. His brother had become something else. The power he had gained from his pact with the entity was palpable. Nathaniel's presence seemed to fill the room, an oppressive force that made the air heavier, harder to breathe. But with every surge of power, Nathaniel became more distant, more alien. His humanity was slipping away, and Samuel could do nothing to stop it. The house had become a cage, each corner a reminder of the price they had paid. As Nathaniel's power grew, so did the darkness that consumed him. He no longer spoke with the voice of his brother. Instead, his words were cold, calculated, laced with a terrifying detachment. The once loving bond they shared now felt like a distant memory, replaced by suspicion and fear. The more Nathaniel embraced the power the entity had given him, the more he seemed to lose touch with everything that made him human. The transformation was subtle at first, but Samuel could see the shift, the gradual erosion of his brother's soul. Desperation clawed at Samuel's mind. He searched through the old book again, hoping to find something, anything, that could undo the damage they had caused. But each ritual he attempted seemed to fail, pulling him deeper into the curse's grip. The mansion's walls seemed to close in around him, the darkness pressing harder against his chest with each passing day. The more he tried to break free, the more it seemed the curse tightened its hold. The whispers taunted him, promising that there was no escape, that the price of their actions had already been paid. The entity's influence was growing stronger, and Samuel could feel himself slipping away, just as Nathaniel had. In the nights when Nathaniel wasn't around, Samuel would sit in silence, wondering if it was already too late. He couldn't bring himself to confront his brother, to face the creature that was slowly taking him over. Every time he looked into Nathaniel's eyes, he saw something else, something hollow, something not quite human. The eyes that once reflected his own fears now reflected an emptiness, as though Nathaniel had become a mere vessel for the power he had summoned. The entity's hold on him was undeniable, and every time Samuel tried to fight it, the consequences became more severe. He could feel himself being dragged deeper into the abyss, each failed attempt at salvation a step closer to his own destruction. Nathaniel, meanwhile, had embraced the power fully. He could feel it coursing through his veins, sharpening his senses, making him more than he had ever been. But with every increase in power, he felt the loss of something vital. His emotions, his connection to his brother, everything that made him human seemed to drain away with each passing hour. The power was intoxicating, but it came at a terrible cost. He could sense it, the part of him that was being consumed, the piece of himself that he would never get back. But he didn't care. The power was all-consuming, and he felt invincible. Nothing mattered anymore, not even his brother. But as Nathaniel's corruption deepened, something inside him began to unravel. The very power that had seemed so alluring now felt like a chain, binding him to an ancient will he couldn't control. The more he used the power, the more he realized that he was not its master. It was his master. It had always been the entity's game, and Nathaniel was nothing more than a pawn. Every time he used the power, it took a little more of him, pulling him further into its grasp. The fear he had once felt was now replaced by an overwhelming sense of hopelessness. He had made the bargain, and now there was no way to break free. The cost had been his soul, and the entity would collect it soon. Samuel's fear had turned to anger. He could see what was happening to his brother, and he couldn't stand idly by anymore. He had to act. But each attempt to confront Nathaniel only seemed to push them further apart. Every time he tried to reach out, the darkness in Nathaniel grew more intense, more violent. The mansion seemed to resonate with their struggle, the very walls trembling with the weight of their conflict. Samuel realized that time was running out. The curse was pulling them both under, and the longer they waited, the more irreversible the damage would be. But the harder he fought, the more the curse consumed him as well. It was a race against time, but neither of them could escape the inevitable. As the internal battle between the brothers escalated, the mansion itself began to reflect their torment. The walls cracked, the air grew thick with tension, and the very foundation of the house seemed to tremble. The curse was reaching its breaking point, and both brothers felt it. Samuel could sense that the final confrontation was approaching, but he wasn't sure if he was strong enough to face the full force of the entity. Nathaniel had become a vessel for it, his soul lost to the power he had so recklessly embraced. Now, Samuel had to make a choice: continue to fight for his brother's humanity, or let the darkness take them both. The terror had reached its peak, and nothing would ever be the same again. The air in the mansion grew thick with a palpable dread, a suffocating weight that pressed down on both brothers. Nathaniel, now fully consumed by the power of the entity, stood at the center of the room, his eyes vacant and cold. The whispers in the walls had grown deafening, the presence of the entity more real than ever. It was no longer a distant force. It was here, in the very air they breathed. The entity's true form was no longer hidden, though it was invisible to the eye. It was a presence that slithered and wrapped around them, feeding on their fear, their pain, and their suffering. The time had come for it to claim what was rightfully its, the price of the pact. Samuel, broken and desperate, clutched the ritual book in his trembling hands. He had studied every page, every incantation, hoping to find a way to end the curse, to seal the entity back into the darkness where it belonged. But the more he read, the more he realized the futility of his efforts. The words in the book felt like they were written in a language he no longer understood. The entity was far more powerful than anything he had anticipated, its influence extending beyond the rituals and beyond the physical realm. The walls of the mansion seemed to pulse with the energy of the curse, and Samuel could feel his hope slipping away, replaced by an overwhelming sense of helplessness. The entity's voice, now clearer and more sinister, echoed through the room, its words carrying the weight of centuries. It spoke of the brothers' past, of their sins, and the dark legacy that had led them to this moment. It fed on their regrets, their guilt, and their deepest fears. As Samuel struggled to speak the words of the ritual, he realized that this battle was never just about breaking the curse. It was about facing the truths they had long buried. The brothers' past, full of pain and trauma, had led them to the entity's grasp. The things they had done to each other, the lies they had told, and the promises they had broken, these were the true price of the pact. And now the entity was ready to collect. In a final, desperate attempt, Samuel shouted the words of the ritual, hoping for some miracle, but it was too late. The entity reacted violently, its power erupting in a wave of darkness that engulfed the room. The very foundation of the house shook, the walls cracking and groaning under the strain. As Samuel finished the incantation, a violent surge of energy erupted from Nathaniel, who screamed in agony as the entity tore through him, claiming its final hold. In that moment, everything seemed to collapse in on itself. The house, the curse, the power, everything was consumed by the darkness. And in the midst of it all, Samuel was left standing, broken and alone, as his brother's screams echoed in the distance. The world around Samuel dissolved into chaos. The mansion, once a place of refuge, was now a crumbling, twisted nightmare. The curse had torn apart everything it touched, and the brothers had become its final victims. But even in the darkness, there was a glimmer of something. Perhaps an opportunity, perhaps a last chance for redemption. Samuel, in his grief and despair, realized that the entity's hold on them might not be permanent. The power had taken its toll, But it had not claimed everything yet. With one final act of defiance, Samuel prepared to make one last attempt to break free, to end the cycle that had bound them both. The house was falling apart, but he still had a chance. Samuel stood at the threshold of the crumbling mansion, his mind a battlefield between his remaining humanity and the overwhelming force that had taken hold of him. The entity's power flowed through him, but it was not the power he had once imagined. It was suffocating, controlling, twisting him into something unrecognizable. His body trembled as he faced Nathaniel, his brother now nothing more than a hollow vessel for the entity's dark will. Their eyes met, and for a moment there was a flicker of recognition of who they once were. But that flicker was fleeting, drowned out by the darkness that had consumed them both. They stood at the edge of a precipice, the final choice before them. The mansion groaned under the weight of the curse, the walls cracking as if they too were aware of the decision to be made. Nathaniel, no longer the man he once was, advanced slowly toward Samuel, his movements deliberate and unnatural. The power he wielded was undeniable, but Samuel could feel the same sense of loss within his brother. Nathaniel's eyes, once filled with life, now held nothing but an empty stare, a reflection of the entity that had claimed him. The fight they were about to engage in was not just physical, it was a battle for their very souls. Would they continue down the path of corruption, or could they break free from the chains they had forged? Samuel's thoughts raced as he took in the full weight of the situation. The entity had promised them power, freedom, but it had only delivered suffering. The pact they had made was not just a bond between brothers, it was a trap, one that had been set long before they had ever entered the mansion. The more they used the entity's power, the more they had given of themselves. Until now, they were mere puppets to its will. Samuel realized with chilling clarity that there was no escaping the entity's grasp unless they destroyed the pact entirely. But doing so meant they would pay a price far greater than either of them could imagine. As Nathaniel reached out, his hand trembling with the power he now possessed, Samuel felt the surge of energy between them, a clash of wills that made the air hum with tension. The entity's voice echoed in their minds, cold and unrelenting, urging them to give in, to surrender completely. But Samuel fought back, his spirit, though weakened, still fighting to hold on. He had to make a choice, one that would either save them both or destroy them forever. The ritual book still clutched in his hand, Samuel knew that destroying the pact might kill them both. But if they continued to give in to the curse, they would lose everything, including their very souls. The room seemed to close in around them, the shadows twisting and growing, feeding off their fear. Nathaniel lunged at Samuel, but he was slower than he had been before, the power that had once been an asset now consuming him entirely. With every step, the brothers were dragged deeper into the abyss. But Samuel held his ground. He could feel the entity's tendrils curling around him, trying to pull him into its embrace, but he resisted. In the chaos of their struggle, Samuel saw the truth. The entity wasn't just seeking power, it was seeking their complete annihilation. The curse was never about control or power, it was about consumption, about turning them into mere vessels for its dark purpose. With one final desperate move, Samuel used the ritual book to perform the last incantation, his voice breaking with the weight of what he was about to do. The energy surged around them, a maelstrom of light and darkness, a final reckoning between the brothers and the entity that had taken everything from them. The mansion shook violently, its walls trembling as if they were about to collapse. Nathaniel screamed, the sound torn from deep within him as the entity's power was torn away from him. Samuel could feel his own strength ebbing, the power of the entity fighting to remain inside him, but he held firm, forcing it out. The room was filled with an explosion of energy, a blinding flash that consumed everything. For a moment, there was nothing but silence, a deep, suffocating void where once the entity had been. When the light finally faded, the mansion was still, but the brothers were not the same. The curse had been broken, but at an unimaginable cost. Samuel lay on the ground, gasping for breath, his body battered and broken. Nathaniel too was collapsed beside him, his once hollow eyes now filled with the remnants of humanity. But it was clear that neither of them would ever be the same. The price of their freedom was not just their bodies, but their very souls, forever scarred by the darkness they had unleashed. The mansion stood in ruins, the curse finally lifted, but the brothers knew that their victory had come at a price they could never undo. As they rose to their feet, the future stretched out before them, uncertain and fraught with the consequences of their choices. They had escaped the entity, but they had paid a heavy price. The battle had ended, but the scars would remain, a reminder of the darkness they had both embraced and fought to destroy. In the silence that followed, they knew their lives would never be the same again, and that the shadows of the past would haunt them for as long as they lived. As the camera pulls back from the smoking ruins of the Lancaster mansion, the once grand estate now reduced to a smouldering heap of ashes and charred remains, the eerie silence that follows is suffocating. The fire, though devastating, has not destroyed everything. Amid the rubble, faint traces of the curse remain. Strange symbols carved into the stones, remnants of the ritual book scattered in the ashes. The air still feels heavy, charged with a lingering, malevolent force that refuses to fade. The destruction of the mansion did little to erase the dark history of the Lancaster brothers. It was as if the fire had only served to bury the past, not destroy it, leaving behind the unmistakable imprint of a curse that continues to hold sway over the land. A new figure enters the scene, a young historian, drawn to the wreckage by rumors of the Lancaster family's tragic past. Her curiosity leads her to the remains of the mansion, where she stumbles upon the first of the symbols etched into the stone beneath the ash. Her hands tremble as she traces the markings, an inexplicable sense of foreboding settling over her. As she ventures deeper into the ruins, she uncovers the ritual book, its pages half burnt but still legible, filled with the same incantations that sealed the brothers' fate. Her eyes widen as she begins to read, unaware that by doing so, she's awakening something that should have remained buried. The curse of the Lancaster brothers is far from over. It has simply waited for the right moment to resurface. The camera zooms in on the book as the wind howls through the shattered remnants of the mansion. The symbols on the pages seem to pulse with an eerie light, as if alive. The young historian stumbles back in terror as the ground beneath her feet shakes, a low rumble reverberating through the ruins. The curse, like an ancient beast, is stirring once more. The final shot is of the book being slowly consumed by the wind, its pages turning with unnatural speed, hinting at the dark legacy that will not be forgotten. The chilling implication is clear. This is not the end. The cycle of terror has only just begun, and anyone who dares uncover the secrets of the Lancaster brothers will find themselves drawn into the same horrifying fate. The curse lives on, and those who seek the truth will pay the price.